Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau from Compassionate Cooks, which I founded in order to empower people to make informed food choices and to debunk myths about vegetarianism and animal rights. You can learn more about who we are and what we do by visiting our website, compassionatecooks.com. Those of you familiar with my regular essays and podcasts know that one of my favorite pastimes is to respond to myths about vegetarianism and animal rights. And this is one of the things I do through my organization, Compassionate Cooks. And the reason I spend so much time responding to these myths is because there are so many of them. People offer so many excuses and justifications so that they can keep eating meat. And whenever I think about them and take a look more closely at what some of these excuses are, it turns out that most of these excuses don't actually reflect reality. And what I find is that they reflect instead a perception of ourselves that we want to hold on to. Many of these justifications are just hypothetical scenarios we've come up with so that we don't have to change how we see ourselves and how we live our lives and what we contribute to with our dollars. And I remember creating one or two excuses myself before I thought long and hard about what I was contributing to. And when I got really honest with myself about how lame my excuses were, and they were lame, I stopped. I stopped eating animals and I stopped making excuses. The other thing I've noticed that happens when you're vegan is that people try to catch you as if they're trying to prove that you're imperfect somehow and that your vegan philosophy is flawed. You've seen this kind of thing. And I'm here to tell you right now that anyone who attempts this with me, you're right, I'm imperfect. So we can just leave that to rest because that's not what being vegan is about for me. It's not about being perfect and it's not about being pure. It's about reducing suffering when I can and where I can. And it turns out that I have a lot of power to do that. One of my favorite hypothetical scenarios that I've heard goes something like this. And, be honest if you've said this to anybody before. It's when someone asks you what you would do in the desert island scenario. They say so look, you're on a desert island. You've been there for weeks. You're not going to get rescued. And I bet you're going to eat meat, right? You're going to eat animals. You're not going to starve yourself to death. Having to deal with these questions sometimes can be trying, but all I can do is hope that this person asking the question would be interested in a genuine dialogue about how they can actually reduce some suffering in this world, because asking me the desert island scenario question is not relevant. It just has no basis in reality. It's not relevant to what being vegan is all about. It's not relevant to what we can actually do in our own lives. They're kind of missing the point. So my hope is that when people ask these kinds of questions, we can actually engage in a genuine dialogue. And there are many hypothetical scenarios like this. That's just one of them. Another somewhat more serious comment I sometimes hear from people is from people who say, look, I don't have a problem with animals being killed for human consumption. I believe that's what animals are here for, but I just don't want to support the torture and abuse that takes place on factory farms. So I buy only humanely raised meat. And frankly, I think I could even kill my own animals if I were raising my own animals. Now, I realize there are people who feel this way. I find that most people would not be able to kill their own animals. And I disagree with the premise because I personally do have a problem with animals being killed for human consumption, but that's not my problem with this statement. My problem has to do with the fact that it primarily rests on hypotheticals and just plain old misinformation. The first thing is that maybe this person would be okay killing her own animals, but A, she's not killing her own animals, and B, by virtue of that fact, and by virtue of the fact that she is eating meat, dairy, and eggs, she is unfortunately contributing to the inevitable abuse and torture of animals. She has an idealized version of what could be, but it doesn't reflect what actually is. Saying that, you could kill your own animal, or you would kill your own animal, or you just want to believe that animals can be raised in a more humane situation, that's all fine and dandy as an ideal, but that's not what's actually happening. Second, what most people don't realize is that even on the most idealized farms that sell humanely raised meat, animals are not lovingly and humanely euthanized when they're fat enough for the dinner table. They're sent to the same dirty slaughterhouses as conventionally raised animals. It's not legal for ranchers, for people raising animals, to kill them, to kill their own animals themselves, unless they're going to eat them themselves. They can't kill the animals on their property and then sell them to the public. The animals are sent to slaughter to the same slaughterhouses, and the transportation alone is incredibly stressful and often fatal for the animals. And the slaughterhouse itself is a place of fear and pain and blood and death. I mean, that's why most people don't want to see it. But if you're willing to see, and I think everyone who eats animals has a responsibility to know what they're paying for, I urge you to go to meetyourmeat.com. It's www.meet, M-E-E-T, your meat, M-E-A-T.com. Third, I've seen what would be considered humane slaughter by people who did kill and eat their own animals. And I'll tell you what I saw. I saw an animal struggling to fight for her life. She didn't want to die. She didn't want her head removed from her body. She didn't want the blade touching her. She struggled to survive. And as I watched the blood drain from her, all I could think about was how calculated this killing was, how calculated and unnecessary. Even in the most idealized situation, killing a living being who would otherwise choose to live is messy, and it's bloody, and it's painful, and it's unnecessary. That's why most of us don't want to watch it. That's why most of us don't want to do it. And my point is that humane slaughter is an oxymoron. It's an oxymoron in someone's backyard, and it's an oxymoron in a commercial slaughterhouse, particularly in a commercial slaughterhouse where most animals killed for human consumption meet their end. And, you know, you can't send more than 10 billion animals through slaughterhouses in one country in 1 year and expect it to be done with love. I know that's what we want to believe, but that's not what's actually happening. And I believe when we rely on these hypotheticals and misinformation to justify real life situations, it's only because we want to see ourselves in a certain way. I don't believe any of us want to contribute to cruelty, to pain, to abuse, to torture. Obviously, that's not how we want to see ourselves. But there isn't any way of getting around it when we eat meat. We're eating corpses. Come on. I mean, we're eating an animal that was clearly alive at one time and is no longer there. And if you think that process was a pleasant one, then you're kidding yourself. And that's what I'm saying, is if we can't tell ourselves the truth about what we're supporting, if we need to make up excuses and hypothetical scenarios to feel okay about what we're doing, then I would suggest that we have a problem with what we're actually doing. Until we stop making excuses, we're not living in truth. We're not living in our own truth, and we're not living in the truth of the real world. And those of us who have stopped eating animals aren't off the hook either. Every time we hear someone justifying eating animals, we have an opportunity to reflect the truth. There are gentle, respectful ways of doing this, but there's no question we must do it. The animals need us as their voice. They don't have one. They need us to speak for them. And if you're not going to speak for them, then who will? Thanks for listening, and have a compassionate day.